So here we've gotten to the end of Midsummer Night's Dream, and all the while there's been an ambiguity about the status of love. Clearly, lovers can be ridiculous, and perhaps love also is ridiculous. Maybe the speech at the start of Act 5 is the truth. Love is a form of insanity. And maybe what Puck says along the way, Lord, what fools these mortals be. Maybe that's the truth. But that doesn't seem to be the final answer of the play. It's also possible that love is a necessary change of perspective, and perhaps love as the flash of lightning in a dark night is perhaps love itself is the truth, and perhaps the power of the experience of love is that it puts the reality of other things into question. So it's a dream so strong that it changes your view of waking life, so that you may be like the young lovers in this play who wake up from their night of love in which they do many nonsensical things, uncertain of whether they're still dreaming or are now awake. So love has always been ridiculous, or ambiguous. It could be ridiculous, or it could be a very serious thing. And we get to the end of the play, and there is a blessing from the realm of the fairies that has to do with children. This is some way the fulfillment, but the end in both senses, the goal to be fulfilled, but also in some way of finishing or being done with love. That the end of the play looks forward to the normal fulfillment of love, and that it brings in new young people who will feel those strong passions again. So there's a fulfillment to these three couples falling into love, getting married, and looking forward to having children. But whether that's all there is to love is still part of the ambiguity. Perhaps it's the strong passions that are eventually put into two people raising a family together. Perhaps it's having those strong passions, having those extreme experiences that are the truth of love. So, in Act 5 here, the love story is done, and that the marriages, the weddings have all been celebrated. The couples are together. We know how they've sorted out. Things seem to have worked out pretty well, and they're all going off into the future together. That part's done. But before we can be allowed to go from the wedding to the marriages, we get the performance of a play, which fills a certain time in between. And so it's a good question to ask, why do we have that? Why do we need that? The tension in the story seems to be gone once the couples are all sorted out. Why doesn't Shakespeare just end the play there? What could this be for? Well, a play can be instructive, and perhaps there's still something for the couples to learn, even though they've all achieved the partner that they most desire. By the end, perhaps there's something they ought to learn along the way. Now, of course, you can't learn anything directly from this play because it is ridiculous. So it points us back to the question is love serious or is it ridiculous? The way the play portrays love is of the most serious and even tragic kind, but of course they do it so badly that they make it seem ridiculous. And that just brings us back to the same questions again. But if this is a kind of lesson, if it teaches us something, perhaps it's that the same elements can seem quite different depending on how they're presented. So the same elements presented here are quite different in the play Romeo and Juliet, where everyone cries at the end. Here, everyone laughs at the end. And this is illustrated here on page 75, Act 5, Scene 1, line 108. The prologue comes in. That would be the character called Peter Quince taking the role of the narrator or the announcer of the play. And we see, there's a simple joke here that the words are appropriate to a normal prologue. They say what playwrights say as a play is about to begin. But because he puts the punctuation in all the wrong places, they have opposite or terrible or insulting meanings. And this is perhaps to illustrate the lesson, that the same elements that is here, the same words, can have opposite meanings depending on how you view them, how you start and stop them. The minor changes can make major differences in meaning. So I'll just read the speech starting at line 108. If we offend, it is with our goodwill that you should think we come not to offend, but with goodwill. And there's the trick. By putting a period at the end of the first line, he's saying, if we're offensive to you, if we've insulted you, that's what we meant to do. But that's not what the whole sentence means. If you ignore that period and read it on and read on, what it says is we came because we didn't want to insult you. To show our simple skill, that is the beginning of our end. Is getting things backwards. As the end which should be where beginning is, and the other way around. Consider then, we come but in despite. Again, you put the period in the wrong place. What you're saying, we consider then we came to, because we don't respect you, we came to insult you. Whereas if you change the pronunciation, the punctuation, we come, but in despite we do not come. So we're here, but not at all to insult you. That's what he meant to say. Skipping down to line 114. All for your delight we are not here. Again, just backwards for a prologue. But if you change the starting and stopping, if you start at line 115, we are not here that you should hear, repent you. Right? We didn't come to make you regret that we are here. And perhaps this is the difference between what's sacred and sublime and high in love and what's ugly and ridiculous and worth laughing at. Just a minor change in elements, slight differences in perspective, and perhaps this is what the young men should be learning while they're on their way from their wedding to their actual marriages. There's no sign that they are actually learning it, and perhaps that's common enough, and maybe a bit of sadness introduced here in the comedy. The men just treat this play as the ridiculous thing that from a certain perspective it is, and they just want to sit in the audience and mock the performers. But the lesson that perhaps they ought to learn is that the beautiful and the ugly are very close to one another. And they might have learned that last night when they were behaving in their foolish ways. But then they were behaving the way lovers behave, so perhaps they themselves were incapable of learning that lesson and having a second chance here in this play. Perhaps they still don't get it. There may be many ways to analyze the joke in this final play, the play within the play in the fifth act, and many hints that might turn out to be instructive about love. Clearly, the basic joke is they're just terrible actors. Quince is a terrible writer. They really don't know what they're doing, and that's the ridiculous thing. But Theseus has already introduced an ambiguity about that one, so it's the best way to rate people according to their goodwill and their intentions, or toward their actual performance. There are many talented people who are neither kind nor generous, nor do they feel any sense of duty, and we prefer their plays because they're smoother and they work better. Throughout, the joke remains what it has been all along, in part that these people believe too much in the power of the imagination, that they think it's an unstoppable power, and they better scale it back or tone it down. They better rein it in, lest the strong imagination do real damage. When of course real life is the other way around. That we too often fail to be inspired by works of the imagination, and things of imitation and fiction just seem like the hollow things, the empty shadows that they are. And perhaps this is why Bottom gets to have the greatest experience of love in the play as a whole, because he's the greatest believer in the power of the imagination. And perhaps that points to the essential quality that you need to be a lover, and perhaps to gain that flash of lightning in the night perspective, which may clue you in about some important elements of life that it would be easy to ignore, and that people who stick very closely to the demands of cold reason would be ignorant of. It does seem that there are many reminders throughout this play that the same thing looks different depending on the perspective or small shifts. The whole play is like that, since it's a true tragic plot played here for comedy. The prologue that I was just going through makes that lesson. It's also worth noting that this has a character, an actual character for the walls. The thing that divides perhaps gives power to the love, as it keeps the young lovers apart and increases their passion. That it sets boundaries in the world. That becomes an actual character and a living thing, when this is entirely unnecessary. It's a joke that they want somebody to actually play the part of the wall. But perhaps walls are the key to where love visits and where it does not, in the same way that the periods at the end of the sentence are the key to messing up the prologue and then rearranging it so that it makes sense again. Perhaps walls are the key to love, and they make the difference between the high kinds and the ridiculous kinds.